Welcome back to the Own It podcast. My name's Dion, and in today's episode, David is back. Welcome back, mate. Good to have you.
Thank you. I've been here so long, I've taken over. I'll be hosting
You're
today.
hosting today, mate.
I am the captain now.
You are the captain now. Niche reference.
Yeah.
Today we're talking about off markets, probably like the poster boy of like buyer agents, for example, and like what everyone wants. First of all, let's explain what an off-market property is, because probably that's where a lot of people go wrong. A lot of people think off-markets have no real estate agent involved. They sometimes don't, but most of the time, an off-market, the best way to explain it is just a property that hasn't hit realestate.com.au or domain.com. It's the easiest way to explain it. It's off-portal. Off-market and off-portal is essentially probably the easiest way to explain it.
What's the motivation for someone to want to list off-market? Let's forget the buyer side of it for a second. Why do they want to sell off market? Is because they're undecided whether they want to sell and you're not really sure what you're going to get?
Sometimes there's very soft sellers. So for the right price, we'll sell. And this can sort of lead into, as you said, like what is the motivation? Sometimes you can have these vendors that aren't very motivated at all because they're like, oh, well, my property is probably worth $1 million. So if I get 1.1 or if I get 1.2, yeah, I'll sell. So sometimes the motivation can be really low, but sometimes privacy, sometimes just want it, sort of quietly done. I think sometimes also financial pressure as well. Like if you've just bought a house and then, within a year or two, you have to sell it, probably don't want everyone on the street seeing you selling again. So sometimes that can also lead into it as well. There are some cost savings. So if you do sell off market, you can save anywhere sort of between if you don't have to paint your property and stage it and pay for realestate.com and get photos and floor plan and video and this and that, you can probably save yourself anywhere between $10,000 to $20,000, $30,000 if you sell it off market.
And are people understanding the fact that that might be reflected in their price, that they might get something a little lower because they're not actually spending that, or they're just too emotional? And
this is exactly this is exactly sort of what is a good point to talk about. And I think in my opinion, the biggest misunderstanding when it comes to off-market properties is that people think they can buy them for massively less. And that's what I say to everyone that reaches out. If you're coming to me to search for off-markets that are quote unquote under market value or are going to be the steal of a lifetime, it actually doesn't exist. That's not how off-market properties work. The best way to explain it is a vendor might spend $30,000 getting it ready for market. Say their property's worth $1 million if they did it. So in off-market, you might be able to buy it for $970. The vendor not spending $20,000 getting their property ready for market means that they have to accept the market value, which is $970. If you don't give your property the best chance to go to market. But this is also where so many people go wrong, is that a vendor will go, oh, well, my place is worth $1 million or my place is worth X, amount. They haven't done any work to prep it for market and they want to buy to overpay. And sometimes buyers just fall for it because it's off market. Oh, it's exclusive. Only we have the chance.
I was about to say, does that play into the mind of a lot of buyers? It's like, oh, there's a little bit mysterious, a little bit of time pressure. They're tying an emotion with, they're feeling like it's out of reach of everyone else and it's only their opportunity.
All the time. People think because it's off market, it's good. Off market doesn't mean it's good. 80% of off markets that get sent to us are just lemons. And because it's off market, it's really hard to actually work it out because you don't have the easiest way to know if a property's good or not is how many other people walk through the property and how many other people bid on the property. Whereas if you have no social proof, it makes your decision-making so much more harder. So that's why I always say it's like off market's a higher risk because you don't have market feedback from anyone else. And that's also not just from a buyer perspective. That's also a vendor perspective. Maybe they could sell it for less, a lot more less because they don't have that whole market feedback. But yeah, from a buyer's perspective, that's where we see so many people overpay because they're like, oh, it's off market, I have to buy it.
Yep.
Or everything sells 10% over that goes to auction. So I have to buy it off market to avoid that happening.
So let's talk about the pros and cons of selling off market and buying off market, right? Is there a con to buying off market? It sounds like it's pretty good upside. You don't have as much competition around. What's the bad side of buying off market?
Just high risk. The high risk in terms of overpaying. Are they trying to flog something off to you off market and that's why they're not prepared to put it on the market? The vendors can sometimes be really unmotivated. So you go through a property, you see it, you love it, you fall in, you're just like, oh, I'm so emotionally attached. Then the vendors want to sell it for we had this scenario literally last week for a client. 1.5 was going to buy the property. We think it's probably worth 1.5. That's where it would sit logically. We offered 1.48. felt like we were going to close a deal somewhere between there and 1.5, and then all of a sudden the vendor comes back at 1.6. Why? Because they don't need to sell. And they're just sort of like, well, actually, you know what? Now we want 1.6. And so the biggest con is vendors that can sort of change their mind. They're not as committed to selling. They're not as motivated. So, that's probably the biggest frustration. But the pros are that you can see a property for what it is.
Yeah.
And I, again, always say to clients, off market, yes, you can save money, but the biggest advantage is less competition. And that's how you can save money. It sort of goes hand in hand. If you can walk through a property, you don't have to worry about competing with all these other buyers. If you can just have a crack at the vendor one-on-one, you can negotiate them down a little bit. That's the biggest upside.
So if I'm going one-on-one with the vendor or the agent in this instance here, what are some red flags I should look out for as a buyer of something off market when I don't have someone like you in my corner?
Mm-hmm.
What am I looking for?
You're looking for what's wrong with it. Why are they selling it off market? So even ask that question, like, why are they selling it off market? That's a really good question to ask, just to find out. Like, sometimes you'll get this whole story of, this and that. Sometimes they're off market because there's the crazy neighbor. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're off market. So you have a look around the street. You might want to knock on a door. So you have to understand why. Because if the property is really good, why would they sell off market? Why would they not give themselves the absolute best chance to get the absolute best price? But then just don't overpay. Like, look at comparable sales. As I said, like, not every off market's a good property. So you just got to look at comparable sales and work out what something's actually worth.
And is there a situation where it makes sense, or when selling off market works?
It works when potentially, like, I honestly feel like the best off market's a vendor that has every intention of going to market. And that's what I say to every client. I'm like, they're the ones we're looking for. We're not looking for someone who's sort of shopping a property around and seeing if they can get more than it's worth. We're looking for a vendor that has every intention of going to market. And then we can get through between when the property's listed and when they get photos and photography, because once they start spending money, they're going to be more invested to going online and they'll expect more. So the best sort of windows between when it's listed and when all the marketing gets done. If we can get in between then, that'll give us the best chance to buy it because the vendor is motivated. They have every intention of going to market. It's probably not a lemon because they are taking it to the market. Mm-hmm. You still obviously do all your due diligence, but the likelihood is the risk is lower. They're the best ones as a buyer to try buy. If I was a vendor, would I sell my property off market? I think unless it was a good price, no, I wouldn't, because I'd want to see what the market was prepared to do.
Yep.
But there's also a lot of vendors that are risk adverse. We spoke about in another episode, buy first, sell first. Like, if you've bought, you have every intention of then listing your property and a buyer comes along with a really good offer. Perfect. I'll take that. It saves me having to go through the process and risking anything. So a really motivated seller is your best off market vendor to buy from. And from a buyer perspective, the best deal is something that has every intention of going online because it's the lowest risk.
Yep.
I'm currently jumping into today's episode just to ask a massive favor. If you could please leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on, we would greatly appreciate it. Now, back to today's episode.
Now, all right, you've sold me. How am I accessing this off-market property on my own? How, as your regular person going, okay, how can I get an off-market? Because maybe the agents don't want to show me the off-market.
And that's the biggest frustration buyers have. How can we find off-market? Like, every buyer wants off. This is the thing you have to remember if you're looking to buy an off-market. Everyone else wants the off-markets too. Everyone else is already calling and texting and emailing all the agents. So you have to compete and make yourself known. We have an unfair advantage because we're buyer agents. Obviously, that gets us a little bit more cut through. Obviously, we're sort of paid to be there, so they know we're serious, not dealing with time wasters. But build rapport with agents. Be super specific about the property you want. So a really good technique is something that sells. So say you're the underbidder of a property, go around and send that result to agents and say, I'm the underbidder of this property. If you have anything similar, let me know. That'll get you so much credibility. You're actively in the marketplace. You're bidding on unconditional, bidding in an unconditional process being an auction. So your finance is sorted, obviously, or you're very comfortable bidding in that process. So it builds massive credibility. It actually gives the agents a tool as well to go into a lounge room of something similar. So they actually know the underbidder of this property. They're still in the marketplace. They'd consider something similar.
Yep.
So that being specific can get you so much credibility. Building rapport so the agents actually know you will build you so much credibility as well. You'll get so many more options from it. And then just proactive. Be proactive. Call, text, but not too much. Don't hound them so much, but make sure you're going out there. Make sure you're getting your face seen. But don't go up to agents that you've never met before and go, "Oh, do you have anything off market?" Because I can tell you right now, they're not going to. There's 30 other buyers that have done it that week to them. They're not going to remember. So the more specific you can be, the better it is. If you have a place to sell, you have an unfair advantage. If you sort of mention, "Oh, we have to sell after we buy," they will hound you.
Yeah.
But they will also show you through more off market. Your likelihood of seeing off markets massively increases. And then obviously, like shameless plug, I think buyer agents are great because the reality is we just have more access to like that's just the reality.
Yeah. And that was my next question, right? So in this off-market process, how does a buyer's agent or buyer's advocate get me the cut through that me as a buyer might need? And a lot of people that I speak to in my line of work, some of them can't justify the buyer agent costs, or at least it's coming to a point now where it's a bit more of a common factor.
It is.
People are going for buyer agents more because, if there's someone acting for the seller, why are we trying to buy the biggest asset of our life on our own? Why not pay a professional, right? I have this old story of a client that was a pool builder and wanted to go out and buy himself an investment property. You're not going to do yourself the best job because you build pools. You don't buy these properties. Similar with yourself, I'm not going to get myself the best deal without someone like you.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think
I'll slide you some cash over.
At least I don't think I will.
Look, some buyers will go out there and they're very capable and they'll get themselves a really good deal. Like that is the truth and reality. And I'd be lying if I said like all buyers make mistakes. That would be a flat out lie. There's a lot of buyers that do like very well. They get great buyers. I see great buyers all the time. I call the agent, "Who bought that? Was that like an advocate or what happened there?" And no, that's just a buyer. Great negotiator. But the reality is there's also a lot of buyers out there that aren't or like shouldn't be looking or don't have the time. So I think what buys us credibility and gets us into more doors is often a lot of the time we've already bought from these agents before. So we already have a very good relationship. They can speak more open to us and don't have to fear that we're like consumer affairs or like a friend of the vendor, or just sticky, having a sticky beak. Like they speak to us very direct. It's a different conversation. It's like what buys this property off market, and if it's a price we think's fair, then we'll most likely sort of work a deal out. If not, then it's like thanks. Like you don't have to worry about advertising this for less. I don't really care. I just want to know what's going to buy it off market. But what makes their life very simple is and this is the convenience of selling off market from an agent's perspective, if they can shop an off market to a buyer's agent, they don't have to do any buyer work. It is so simple. They call us, they say, "Here's the property." We do all the buyer work. We answer all the buyer questions for the buyer. So they're just showing a buyer through a property and the buyer comes back with an offer.
Yeah.
It's that simple for them. And so the advantage of a buyer's agent is pretty much that a real estate agent, it's like they know we are an efficient, quick method to selling a property with a highly motivated and a buyer that they do not have to do any education or explain the process to. So it's very straightforward, very simple. Yeah. Off-market deals sometimes almost feel too easy because there's no complexity to it. It's just what buys it, and if it's fair, then we don't muck about. Like this, and this is a big mistake. And if you have a question here further on about like, what's the common mistakes buyers make, the biggest mistake buyers make is then trying to, and as I said from the start, trying to get too cute, thinking that they can buy an off-market property for well less than it's worth. If you have the chance to buy an off-market and you like the off-market and what they're selling it for is fair, just pay the price. Don't overcomplicate it. If that's what it's worth, don't overcomplicate it, because as soon as you start trying to get fancy, save yourself some money, something happens, another buyer comes along, it goes to market, you lose a good chance, an opportunity, and then you lose it.
Yeah.
Don't get too cute. So yeah, it's sort of answered a couple.
Yeah, that's fine. Look, to sort of bring it full circle, because we spoke a lot about buyer agent and the role you have in buying a property, not just an off-market. Is an off-market automatically better? I'm going to assume no. I'm going to say that buying off-market, buying on-market, no one method is better than the other. Is that correct in saying that?
I would like to think they've got a pretty balanced ratio when it comes to buying on-market and off-market. And that's from someone who works in buying property every day. It's a 50-50 split. That's where I like to have it. You don't want to go in and just buy everything off-market, because if you do that, there's a high chance you'll be overpaying just to force deals. You can see an off-market, you can love an off-market, and you can let that off-market run to market and buy it when it's on the market if you don't think it's worth it. So there's balance. There's definitely good opportunities off-market, but there's also still plenty of good stuff on market. You don't want to sort of focus on only one thing, or, you don't want to only go just on market. You don't want to only just go off market. It's all about balance. But right from the start, as I said, not every off market is a good off market. Most of them are junk. You have to work out what is actually good. If you find a good opportunity, buy it. Don't muck about. But if it's not worth it, let it run to market and then try buy it on the market. That's the best way to sort of deal with off markets.
Before we wrap it up, give me one. If I'm going to go out to an off-market property, or I'm going to start looking for off-market properties, choose, if you could give one tip to me going out, just one, what would it be?
If I was, I'd probably put this down the like sourcing of how to source off markets. And I would say the best way to do it is to just sit on your phone at 6 o'clock at night and go through sold results, text agents from it on realestate.com. So just text them through. I was a real estate agent. People would never do this. Maybe it's changed. Just text them. This is a great result. If you have anything similar off market, I would love to hear about it. I'd be very interested. That'll get you so much more cut through than saying at an open for inspection, do you have anything off market? Because everyone else is doing that.
Yep. Sounds good.
Thanks for joining me again, mate. I think you're here next week as well.
No, that's fine. Oh, it's my podcast now, apparently. So it's all good.
You're the captain now,
yeah,
mate.
I'm the captain.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Hopefully you've learned a little bit more about off markets. As I said, I think the most important thing to remember is it's not the be all end all. Don't get caught up in it. Off markets can be good, but just like anything else, just like properties on the market, they can be good, they can be bad. Hopefully you've taken a little bit away from this episode. Thanks, David, for joining, and we'll catch you in next week's episode.